Good afternoon. From Parshat Matos Maasei, Tavshin Pei Aleph. We're going to try to connect different parts of these two parshas that make for a very long Kriyas HaTorah. There are certain things we do every year. I made a joke at the women's share earlier this week. We were going over something we go over many times, and I started to list for the women the things that we go over many times. There are certain things that we can walk away after years and years of shiurim and say, I know the first Rashi in Chumash. Right? Why did the Torah start with Bereshis? To teach you Eretz Yisrael is yours. I know that Shavuos there are no tablets. The luchas are Shavuos b'tamlis. Shavuos is my Menas Sinai. Different things we do. One of the things we also do, and we'll do it a little quickly because there's a long parsha to go through, is the Ramban. The Ramban in the meaning HaMitzvahs, the Rambam, we'll have to use Maimonides and Nachmanides today so that you can hear clearly who's who, because I say Ramban, it's hard to distinguish sometimes. We all know that the Rishonim busied themselves with writing minyan mitzvahs. The Gemara at the end of Makkah says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Dorish Reb Samlai, I believe, that 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. Where does that magic number come from? It comes from a Gemara. The Gemara said there are 613 mitzvahs, 248 you shall do, and 365 you shall not do. Equals 613. How do I know that? So the Gemara says, God says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Mayrasha kilas Yaakov. Torah equals 611. Taf is 400, Vav is 6, Reish is 200, Hey is 5. 611. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe taught me 611. The first of the two, Aseres Hadibros, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Lo Yeh Lecha Elohim Hachem Lapana, we heard directly from the Rebbeinu Shloim. That's something that Moshe had to give us. So we have the Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe of 611 plus Anochi Lo Yeh, Mipi Hagvu Shmanam, 611 plus 2 is 613. But obviously we have no Gemara that says, and here are the 613. Right? In different places the Gemara says that if you do this it's a lois aseh, if you do this it's naseh, aseh doicha lois aseh, so we know that tzitzis is naseh, we know that shatnez is a lois aseh because of the Lashon Gemara aseh doicha lois aseh. Other places the Gemara uses the Lashon aseh lois aseh, but we don't have a 613 in the Gemara, which leads the Rishonim to a very big machlokes how to count the 613. So one of these places occurs in Parshas Maasei, because when you read Psukim, sometimes a pasuk can sound like this is a mitzvah you shall do, and sometimes the pasuk sounds like that I promise this will happen. I promise this will happen is not a mitzvah. So in Parshas Maasei, Perek Lamed Gimel. Now remember, we ought to start with a Chidush Yarim. The Chidush Yarim, the first Ger Rebbe Zechron Tzaddik Levracha, says in this week's Parsha that we understand next week we're coming Mi'etz Hashem to Chumash Devarim. Chumash Devarim is called Mishnah Torah. It's a Chazorah. Moshe Rabbeinu is going to review the whole Torah, all the mitzvahs plus the history of the Jewish people. He's going to do it for the new generation. The old generation died because of the Chet HaMeraglim. The new generation's going into Eretz Yisrael. And he says, listen, I want to tell you about Mitzrayim, the 40 years in the desert. I want to review some mitzvahs with you. I'm going to give you a couple of new mitzvahs from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's called Mishnah Torah. It's the sort of the Chazorah of Torah, which means that tomorrow, Mi'etzem Shabbos Kriyas HaTorah is going to be the Siyam HaTorah. Except you don't make a siyum until you do the Chazorah. So we don't have Simchas Torah until after we read V'zois HaBracha. But Chumash Devarim is already the Chazorah. So what we see in these two parshas is the last things that the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe to tell us, so to speak, that are new, or they sound new. In Chumash Devarim, for most, the vast majority of Chumash Devarim is already a Chazorah. So if you look through these two parshas, there's it's almost like a mad rush, right? It looks like me before coming to Shir, right? It looks like a mad rush. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to photostat this, I have to photostat this, and I have to find a parking place. It's the mad rush to get everything in at the last second. There's so much in these two parshas, right? There's the parsha of Nedarim and Shavuos. There's the parsha of Hagolas Kalim. Right? And there's the famous question the Rishonim ask. This is not the first war the Jews fought. They captured Kalim in Parshas Matos from the Midyanim. So they get a new mitzvah. You can't just take Kalim that belong to a guy in Toivlet in a mikveh. You have to do a certain Hagolah, or you have to burn it out. Right? Whether it's a water Hagolah or it's the fire, you have to do Libun, whatever it is. And this we learn from the Kalim captured from Midian. At the end of Parshas Chukas, Moshe Rabbeinu led a war against Sichon and Og. What happened to those Kalim? Why didn't we get the halachas of Hagolas coming? And Rishonim asked that. Why did it happen here? We get more about the borders of Eretz Yisrael in Parshas Maasei. We get additional rules about Orei Miklot in Maasei. We get a reminder of what the penalty is for killing someone b'mezid. And then we get the final chapter of the B'nai Slavchad. If you really think about almost each of these parshas, they could have been inserted somewhere else where we were talking about this already, so why don't we just finish the discussion? Hagolas Kalim could have been discussed in Parshas Chukas. The Parsha of Nedarim could have been easily discussed in Parshas Nosoi, where the Torah talks about the most famous of all Nedarim, Nazirus. Ish, how does the Torah talk about Nazirus? Ish kiyafli neder nazir lahazer. If a person will make a neder to be a nazir. So finish already. No, you can make a neder nazir, you can make a neder like this, you can make, I'm not going to eat apples. A husband could be made for, he could, we'll see his wife's Nazirus, he could be made for his wife's Nadar. No, we're only talking about Nazirus, we're going to leave the rest for Matos. If your mamish look at the Parshas, the Hoyrik Nefesh Bishgogo was already in Parshas Mishpatim, Orei Miklot. Hoyrik Nefesh B'mezid was in Parshas Mishpatim. And this is not Chumash Devarim, this is still the Ikar Torah. We're not everything's Ikar Torah, but we're not going to the Chazor yet. So we have two long parshas of different sugyas that could have been just in different places where they belong. The mashmois is therefore that the Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe that I want you to put certain parshas together as the closing of round one of the Torah. And next week we're going to get to Chazorah. But before we go to Chazorah, I want certain parshas that could have been written in different places. I want these certain inyanim put together in one parsha back to back, or two parshas Matos Maasei. So we have kama v'kama parshas here, and we know that the Chedush says that the Rebbeinu Shalom first wants to teach us as we get to the end of the Torah before Devarim Chazorah. He wants to teach us the power of human speech. Until now, we were talking about mitzvahs. Mitzvahs. Put on tzitzis, put on your tefillin, talk about mitzvahs. And most of the mitzvahs we know are mitzvah sheba ma'isa. You have to do something. Even the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael. You plant, you cut, you give trum, you give ma'isa. You don't do this during Shemitah. They're physical mitzvahs. So there's been so much attention given to physical mitzvahs that a person can walk away and say that what he says doesn't have such a great impact. And what he thinks has even less of an impact. So we're going to see in Parshas Matos and Maasei, the Chidush Rim says, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to teach us, before we get to Chazah, the Torah, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to teach us that if you think that only your physical acts are important, I'm going to show you how powerful your speech is and how powerful what you think is. What's a Parsha of Nedorah? Parsha of Nedorah is, somebody says, apples, whatever the difference between a neder and a shvuah. Basically, a neder is an issa cheftza, and a shvuah is an issa gavra. If I'm looking at apples, I don't have to be looking at them, but if I say, apples are usher on me, whatever the magic words are, apples are usher on me, that's a neder. Because what I'm looking at is the apple. If I say, I will not eat apples, that's a shvuah. Because the subject is me. If the subject is an object, it's a neder. If the subject is me, what I will or will not do, it becomes a shvuah. Okay, technical difference, which has a lot of halachic ramifications. What did I do here? I said, apples are usher on me. Okay. What did you do? You put on tefillin. You ate chazir. What did you actually do here? You said a couple of magic words. A couple of magic words. A person says, I will not eat apples, and uses the magic lashon for Shavua. Shavua, I will not eat apples. Whatever the magic lashon is. He eats the apples. What does he get? Besides everything else, what does he get? He gets malchus. He gets 39 lashes. For what? What do you do? What do you do here? He ate chasa. He ate chasa. He got 39 lashes, right? Chazah, ooh, that dirty chazah. Chazah, we don't even like to say the word chazah. The Gemara uses the word davar acher. It doesn't even want to use the word chazah. The Gemara calls it davar acher. Chazah means you get malchus. It's a beautiful apple. I, Shavua, will not eat apples. You eat the apple, you get malchus just like chazah. What exactly? How did you do that? How did you make a shtickle apple into a shtickle chazah? The Rebbeinu Shalom is teaching us here that you have an incredible power with your words. Incredible power with your words. Power of words. Well, let's take a look at we'll come back to the Ramban in a second. Let's take a look now at Parshas Matos, Perek Lamed, Pasuk Vav. And we're looking at the Rashi, V'Hashem Yislach Lo. There's a machlekes here how to read this. But I'm going to read you, Rashi says, V'Hashem Yislach Lo, it's talking about a woman, a married woman. And a woman could be a Nazirah, just like a man could be a Nazir. And the woman says the magic words, Hareini Nazirah. Her husband hears that, and he's going to have nothing he's not having a frumak in his house. He's not going to have a Nazir in his house. Yeah. I say that sarcastically, but there are different inyanim about Nazir. Like it's in the Gemara, if he's a chayte, if he did a good thing. Remember, Nazir, after he's done, brings a korban chatas. So, he says, I'm not having a Nazir in my house. And he says, mufalach, 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 which a husband can do within 24 hours, within the same day, whatever the halacha is. And she doesn't know that he said mufalach, mufalach, mufalach. And she decides she can't hold herself back, so she pours herself a cup of wine. She drinks the wine. That's the case in the pasuk. And the pasuk says, Vashem yislach lo. God will forgive her for her sin. What sin? She didn't do anything. What's the sin here? Because she thought she was doing the sin. She didn't do anything. She didn't do a sin. Now we are familiar with Rabbi Akiva at the end of Masechta Rabbi Akiva at the end of Masechta Matos, everyone's crying when they see Shuolim Hilchuvo. Yeah. Foxes are running through the Kodesh Kadoshim, and they're crying, and he's laughing. We all know the story. And they say to him, what are you laughing about? And he says, what are you talking about? What are you crying about? And he says, because I'm looking at something different. The same way Yirmiyah said, Shuolim Hilchuvoi, and it came true. Let's look at all the books of the Nevi'im about the good things that are going to happen. So if the bad things come true, the good things come true. So when I look at destruction, when I look at the Golas, I look at Gula. It was very hard to make Rabbi Akiva cry. Right? He has a different way of looking at the world. He's a different perspective. He's looking at the Kodesh Kadoshim. He's looking at animals running through. He says, good, fine. And he's laughing. The Gemara in Kedushin on Pei Aleph from a base, which is where Rashi gets his commentary from. The Gemara says what we just said. That the pasuk is talking about a woman who said Harei Nazira. Her husband said Mufalach, Mufalach, Mufalach. She drinks wine and she doesn't know that her husband was matir in Naziris. Hashem yislach la. Hashem has to forgive her. So Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva kehava motir laha psuka hava bochi. When Rabbi Akiva came to this pasuk, Rabbi Akiva Shabbos Parshas Matos Maasei, he heard this pasuk, Vashem Yislach La, he broke down crying. Omar, Rabbi Akiva said, Uma mish neskaven lechel bosa chazir, va'ola biyodei bosa tleh, omra toiret tzricha kapora, uslicha. Mish neskaven lechel bosa chazir, va'ola biyodei bosa chazir, lachas kama v'kama. Can you imagine if a person thought to do an Aveira? She thinks she's a Nazira, and nevertheless she drinks wine. And the Torah says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to forgive you for the thought. Can you imagine if someone thinks about doing an Aveira and actually does the Aveira? Can you imagine what kind of mercy you need from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give you slicha kapara? If you thought about it but didn't do it, you need slicha kapara. Alachas kam v'kama. And then Rabbi Akiva gave another example. The Gemara says, Isi ben Yehuda imav loyoda vosh v'nos avoynai al dova ze yidvu kol hadavoyim. Because of this idea, Isi ben Yehuda said, yidvu kol hadavoyim. Everyone ought to al zeh hayadova libeinu. Everybody should be crushed by these psukim. Be crushed, Parshat, from such an idea. I thought about doing something. This was. I didn't do anything. So we have here, right in the Parsha of Nedarim, we have not only the idea that there's a power of speech. In the Parsha of Nedarim itself, we have the idea of the power of a thought. Let's go now to Matos, Lamed Aleph, Perak Lamed Aleph, Pasuk Aleph. Hashem tells Moshe, Nekaim nikmas b'nei Yisrael me'esam ed yodem achat yasef alamecha. Moshe Rabbeinu, get the army together. We're taking care of Midian because of what they did with Bilam over there, with the Benois Midian, the Benois Moav. We are going to war, Moshe. Moshe gets the army together, and they bring back a tremendous amount of booty. Gold, silver, ganze feine Sachen.
Cleaned out the whole nation.
They cleaned out the whole thing. And they brought back women, and then Moshe Rabbeinu castigates them. I told you not to bring back the married women. Ganze Maasei. And the pasuk says, "Vayiktzayif Moshe." First of all, you get the tax in between, right? There's a tax. The army brought back all these things. Elazar gets, the Kohanim get a piece, and the army gets a piece. So we get the splitting of the Malkoyach. Pasuk Lamed Aleph Pasuk Yudalev. Vayiktzayv Moshe al Pekudei Achoyel. Sorry ha'alofim v'sorry ha'meis ha'boyim mitzvah milchama. Moshe Rabbeinu gets angry at the army. Vayom alei Moshe ha'chayisim kol nekeva. You brought back and allowed to live all the women. I told you that married women, we'll call them married women, are not to be brought back. Okay. Then we have Pasuk Chafalev, Vayomer lo zakar lan she'atzav bo l'milchama, zoizchu kasar she'tziv Hashem es Moshe. Aches hazov es hakesef, and that's the parsha of Gil Nachor. You have to kasha the kalim if a guy owned them. Okay. And then the tax is given out, the booty is split. Let's go now to Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Memches. Okay, so what do we have now? The soldiers got their share of the booty. Elazar HaKohen got his share. The booty's been split up. Pasuk Memches. Vayikvu el Moshe apkudim asher lalfei atzara sorei alav v'sorei hameis. And the generals of the army came to Moshe, and they wanted to talk to Moshe. Vayomer el Moshe avodecha nosra sois anshe milchama asher b'yadeinu v'lo nifkad mimenu ish. We've counted all the soldiers that have returned from war, and it's the exact amount of soldiers that went out to war. We haven't lost a single man, Baruch Hashem, in this war with Midian. And therefore, Vanakrev es korban Hashem, we now want to bring an offering to Hashem. Ish asher motza kli zahav, any man in the army who found a golden vessel, what kind of vessel? It's otov, it's samid, tabas, ogel, v'chumas. Rashi explains what all these things are. Bracelets, necklaces, all kinds of, Rashi explains, kumas. It's in those days, the goyim, the women, especially princes, wore a chastity belt. So all these things were captured. And the army, the soldiers want to give it to Moshe. We need a kapara. Rashi, a kapara for what? They just said that we counted every man and every man's return, which means that they fought a perfectly clean battle, which means that they didn't do aveirus. Otherwise, there would have been nebuch losses, as we see in Sefer Yeshua, by the eye. There were no losses. So what kind of a kapara do they want? So Rashi says on Pasuk Nun v'chumaz the fushal beis harechem, a chastity belt. Lechaper al hirur halev shel b'nai Midian. That's from the Gemara in Shabbos HaMachdalid. The soldiers said, "Imidei aveira yotzanu." We didn't do any aveiros with those women. But midei hira lo yatzanu, we had thoughts. And because of those thoughts, we want to give our gold from these bracelets and necklaces. We want to give it to Moshe. We don't want to have this. It's an offering to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive us for the thoughts. What do we have again in the parasha? The power of thoughts. So we know that Mida Taivim Rub Midas Piranus, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Mida of good is much greater than the Mida of punishment. And this is a rule. If you find a Mida for punishment, then the Mida for reward is much, much greater. So if we say Hirhur Aveira, the thoughts of an Aveira are Aveiras, and need a kapara. And the woman who thinks she's a Nazir and drinks wine, you need Hashem Yislach Lo. And a person that makes a neder, his dibur, can result in breaking the dibur and 39 lashes. The power of speech and the power of thought. Allah has kama v'kama, with proper speech and proper thought. Allah has kama v'kama. How great the power is. Let's take a look at the Ramban before we go any further to make sure that we learn the Ramban. We'll do it quickly. The Ramban is now in Parshas Maasei. We said that the Rishonim have different ways to count 613 mitzvahs. Perek Lamed Gimel Pasuk Nun Gimel. Pasuk Gimel. Lamed Gimel Gimel. Vaydav Moshe v'Avos Ma'al Yad Meichel Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe. Daber b'nei Yisrael v'mat aleim ki atem oev Mesiyadan et Knan. Go speak to b'nei Yisrael. Tell them that you are crossing the Jordan River. Vayrashtem es kol yoshvei aretz b'neichim. You want to chase out all the Gentile nations that live there. Vibatem es kol maski yosef es kol tzalmim Maasei chos tabei es kol b'mois tashmidu. Destroy all the avodah zaros and destroy all their altars. Vayrashtem es haaretz. Perek Lamed Gimel. Yeah. We're now in Pasuk Nun Gimel. Nun Gimel. Why I say Gimel? Yeah. Nun Gimel. Okay. Nun Gimel. Vayrashtem es haaretz. And you're going to chase out the nations. You're gonna empty out Eretz Yisrael from the nations. There, Vishaftem ba, and what does Vishaftem ba mean? You'll chase out the nation. You'll come to Eretz Yisrael. You'll chase out the goyim. You will live there, or you shall live there. This is an example of how you're going to read the pasuk. Is it one of the 613 or not one of the 613? Vishaftem ba, and you will or shall live there. Because I gave it to you for you to inherit. Rashi learns, Vayrashtem es haaretz, Vayrashtem ma'isam yoshvea, pasuk nun gimel, va'oz vishaftem ba tuchul eskayim ba v'mlav lo tuchul eskayim ba. Rashi learns, and you will live there, not shall. If you chase out all the goyim from Eretz Yisrael, you will be able to live there. But if you don't chase them out, so you look at Pasuk Nun Hey. Pasuk Nun Hey says, if you don't chase out the goyim and you try to live together with them in Eretz Yisrael, the goyim that you leave over in Eretz Yisrael, there'll be thorns in your eyes, there'll be thorns in your sides, and they will constantly give you tzoros. Okay. So that's how Rashi learns the parasha. If you chase them out, you'll be able to live there. If you don't chase them out, you won't be able to live there. The Ramban disagrees with this, and the Ramban says, "V'shaftem ba" means, and you shall live there. This is why living in Eretz Yisrael is one of the 613 mitzvahs. So if you look at the page, we're looking at Nachmanides. The Ramban wrote a commentary on the Rambam Maimonides. Maimonides counted the 613 mitzvahs. There's a sefer mitzvahs of Maimonides. Nachmanides commented on that sefer and said, no, the Rambam missed out here, here, and here. Well, you got a problem. If the Rambam already has 613, and Nachmanides says there's 6 more, I have 619, right? But I can only have 613. So what Nachmanides does is he says these 6 that the Rambam counts are not really mitzvahs, and in place it should be these 6. Much is made about the Rambam. We spoke about it many times. Much made about the Rambam in the Sefer Mitzvahs. When he counts 613 mitzvahs, he doesn't have the mitzvah there to live in Eretz Yisrael. It's what we call a red herring, right? It's a lo minei v'lo miktsasei, because if you want to pasuk in a shaila, you don't go to the Rambam's minyan hamitzvahs. You go to the Rambam's Yad HaChazaka. Right? The halacha seif is Yad HaChazaka. The Rambam Yad HaChazaka. The Rambam Yad HaChazaka in Hilchos Malachim, he says it's also to leave Eretz Yisrael except for the following reasons. And you know, parenthetically, it's really the issue that I wanted to get to, and that's why I want to talk about the power of speech and the power of thought. There's so many things I don't know. I talked about it last year when we were on Zoom. I think it was June time. Someone decided to send me an article. For those who remember, we were on Zoom. Somebody emailed me an article of a very, very famous, quote unquote famous, famous rabbi in America, who gave a shir about making aliyah. And he said, yeah, you should make aliyah. And I can't. I'm not ready for it. One of the reasons he gave is it's going to be very hard to, he would want to move with his children and grandchildren. It's going to be very hard for his grandchildren to learn Ivrit. It's going to be a very difficult culture change. And he goes on and on and on and on. Now, this same rabbi, years before, so someone sent me this article to read. And not an article. It was a link to listen to his speech. And it was nimus after a couple of minutes. I couldn't even listen to it anymore. So that Thursday, whenever it was, I gave a shir about this Rabbi Zoom. So if you go to YouTube and you look at Rabbi Lubling, the real reason, I don't know who gave it that, I talked about the real reason to live in Eretz Yisrael. So somebody posted this year from the Zoom, they uploaded it, and it's called the Rabbi Lubling, The Real Reason. It has about 1,400 views. Okay. Pseudo. Because there are certain people here in Eretz Yisrael who, when they lived in America, were big Hasidim of this famous rabbi. So he wrote me nasty emails, we're never going to listen to your shir again, we're unsubscribing from your Zoom. Oh, you can imagine how I was broken, and I was, maybe I should retract what I said, maybe I should apologize, maybe he's right. The people who have been with here for years, for 12 or 14 years doing this, understand that we have 2 people, 1 person, 5 people, 10 people, 6 people. It's alone or gaily, and that's what we're going to talk about hopefully today. So there are things that people say that I don't know why people either want to aggravate me. Well, people send me emails, articles, links. And I don't know why I have to listen or read this stuff. I just got one this morning, and what I did, I just delete it, because I know what it's going to be. I just delete it. I don't even want to listen to it. Someone sent me, last week, an article that appeared in Bina. I don't know what Bina is. I don't buy any of this stuff, some kind of magazine. Okay. Because the Gemara says that women have Bina Yisera. Okay. So it's called Bina. The same article, I was told, appeared in Mishpacha. And it's written by a woman here in Eretz Yisrael. And this woman became a poisek. Somebody wrote this woman. I think she writes a weekly column. Somebody wrote this woman from America. She really wants to make Aliyah with her family, but she don't know if he can do it right now, after all this, and after all this, and after all this. And Al Kulam, she really wants to refurbish her house there in New York, put in a new kitchen, this and that, and she feels guilty. You know what article I'm talking about? And she feels guilty, she really wants to go to Eretz Yisrael, but how can she invest so much money in a kitchen? So this Paisekes, or Rabbanit, whatever, says, no, you don't have to feel guilty. When Yirmiyah, the Psukim in Yirmiyah, when Yirmiyah told the Jews to go into Golus, he told them 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, he said, go into Golus, and wherever you end up, build houses for yourself, make yourself gardens, and therefore don't feel guilty if you're in America, build a house, make yourself gardens. I can't give a shir on why those psukim in Yirmiyah have nothing to do with what's going on 2,500 years later. But this is the kind of brutal nonsense that occurs when we're discussing Eretz Yisrael. Someone sent me an article also last week that a shaila was asked by certain Jews from What's the capital of Algeria? Not Algiers. There's what? Algiers? Algiers. Or some, I don't know if it was Algiers or a different city. Anyways, a group of Jews from there that want to make Aliyah. Somehow this Shaila got to a Rav in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rav, on his weekly shiur, he discussed this, and it was taped. And they uploaded the tape. And he says like this. These people, now remember, you can imagine what kind of Yiddishkeit there is in Algiers already, or wherever this place is. Tunisia. Tunisia. You can already imagine, what? Tunis. You can imagine already the Groiser Shmiras HaTorah in Tunis. It used to be tremendous Yidden there. But you can imagine what's going on there today. So the Rav says, and this is what I wrote back to the community, if their intention is to leave Tunis and come to a Haredi city in Eretz Yisrael, that's what they should do. But if they intend to go to a city that's not Haredi, better stay in Tunis. So this is a ganz choshev Rav. Okay, so we can have a whole vikuach here, but we read the Rambam here that comes from a Gemara in Ksubis. The Gemara in Ksubis says, and the Rambam paskins, the Rambam who doesn't count in the 613 mitzvahs that you should live in Eretz Yisrael, he paskins the halacha that a person should live in Eretz Yisrael in a city that has a majority of goyim, better than living in Chutz La'aretz in a city that's majority of Shomrei Torah mitzvahs. That's a Gemara in Ksubis, and the Rambam pasks like that. So what does the Rav do with the Gemara? Not my business. But there's plenty written about that Gemara in the Rambam. There's a tshuva in the Alter Nezer. But there's so much hot air out there. There's so much hot air out there that the question becomes, in this week's Parsha, the same way you have kalim, physical kalim, that belong to a goy. You can't just take them. You have to be magal them. You have to kasher them. Right? There's so much Torah pollution out there. Things that are said in the name of Torah that are pure pollution. That the question becomes, how do you do hag'olas pollution? Right? And I'm not being an environmentalist here. I'm not green. Okay? But how do you do hag'olah on Torah pollution? Where people take things and they so twist them. How do you get rid of the pollution? So first of all, and we're not going to have time to fully talk about this, but B'li Neder, maybe we'll talk about it next week. The pasuk, we're familiar with these psukim because they're from Malachi Gimel, and it's a haftarah of Shabbos Hagadol. The Shabbos before Pesach, this is the official haftarah according to most in Hagim. Malachi is the last Navi. After he dies, that's the end of Nevi'im. And the last psukim, Hine Anochi shalech lechem es Eliyahu hanavi lefnei bo yom Hashem hagol v'anoyer v'heshiv leivavos aban leiban lavois v'en ovei v'kesis oretzchem. Last Nevu. We don't believe that we're going to mamish learn through pasuk by pasuk this Nevu. But I'm just going to go through some psukim here. Chos kolai devreichem Oma Hashem. Rabbanu Shalom says to Klal Yisrael, Chos kolai devreichem. The words that you speak are too much for me. What you're talking is really, I can't take it, Rabbanu Shalom says. Chosku alai devreichem. Oma Hashem. And the Jewish people answer God, Madid ba'anu alecha. What did we say bad? What did we say bad? Skipping a few psukim. Pasuk then says, Oz nidbaru yiri Hashem isha v'yehu. And at that time, God-fearing people will talk one to another, isha v'yehu. We're talking about a time where you got to find someone to talk to. There's going to be such nonsense going around, and people will not have ears to hear, that you're going to have to look for someone to talk to. Ishalayeh. And the pasuk uses a very interesting word here. Oz nidbaru. What does nidbaru mean? It should have said Oz yidabru. And at that time, Oz yidabru ishalayeh. At that time, one man will speak to a friend. What's nidbaru? Nidbaru, the letter nun, always means an action. It means something's happening, something's being done. Az nidbru Hashem ishalayeh. And at that time, a man will find another man and be able to talk to him. And that talk will be the equivalent of an action. Vayakshev Hashem vayishma. Hashem will hear what they're talking and listen carefully. Vayikosev seiv zikaron lefonov. And HaKadosh Baruch is going to write down the discussion. Eza chashivus. The Baruch is going to have a book of these discussions. Liyar Hashem. For those people who feared Hashem, u'lechoshvei shemoy, and to those who thought about Him. Now, usually the interpretation is, and those who made God important. The Gemara says that's not what it means. The Gemara in Baruch Vav Amud Aleph, the very famous Gemara that we all know about. Choshev Adam Lasos Mitzvah, v'nenas v'lo yasor. If someone thought to do a mitzvah, and there was an oinus, something prevented him beyond his control, and he couldn't do the mitzvah. Malalav hakos kilasol, the Torah says, it's as if you did it. Shenema l'chosh ve'shemay. This pasuk tells you that even if you thought about doing something and you couldn't actually do anything, you've done it, and you get schar as if you did it. Nenas lo yasam alav hakos kilasol. So what does the pasuk say here? Oz nidbaru. At that time, God-fearing people will find one another. You have to look for them, one another. And they'll talk to each other. And that talk will be as if they did something. Because sometimes you get kind of depressed. I'm talking. Nothing's changing. Chas v'shalom to have such a thought. And that's what the last nevuah of Malachi is. Find someone to talk to. Talk about it. It's as if you did something. And not only that, even if you think about it, the same pasuk, Oz nidbaru ishalayehu, vayakshev Hashem vayishma, vayikosev seiv zikaron lefonov. God's going to write down the discussion. Li Hashem l'chosh v'shema. Even if you thought about it, it's as if you did something. That's how we clean up the pollution. The same way that the place gets polluted from the words, the zooms, the writings that pervert the Rebbeinu Shalom's message. The same way you can do a hagol on that pollution by talking, writing, and thinking about God's message. What do I accomplish? What do I accomplish? One person, 2 people, 5 people, 10 people. I talk to you, I talk to them, you talk to me. What do we accomplish here? Garnish. You can't imagine. We don't understand. That's what Malachi is teaching us. Are we going to change people? That's not our job. We can't. But can we clear the air a little so that maybe they'll start breathing cleaner air? And when they start breathing cleaner air, maybe they'll start thinking differently. That we can do. We can try to clean the air for them. We can clean the air for them because of the power of speech and the power of thought. So the Ramban will help us clear the air for a moment or two. So the Rambam did not count living in Eretz Yisrael as one of the 613 mitzvahs in the mitzvah book. In the halacha book, he has all the halachas of you have to live in Eretz Yisrael. Nachmanides, commenting on the Rambam, says, in one of the mitzvahs, the Rambam forgot to count, so to speak. I'm going to put in, Nachmanides says. Nachmanides says, "Shenitzavinu l'resh sa'ot asher nosna kel yisal l'avaysein l'avram litzak l'Yaakov," where there's a mitzvah that we are to live in Eretz, that we are to conquer Eretz Yisrael, that was given to Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. V'lo inazvena b'yad zulosei min u'mois or l'shmama. We will not allow it to be, we will not allow sovereignty of any other nations over the land. Oil Shmama, we're not going to allow it to be desolate. You have an apartment, first floor apartment, you make a garden, it's pretty, you have flowers, you have a porch apartment, you put up some pots there, and you make it pretty and beautiful, Eretz Yisrael is not to be shmama. It's God's land, it's God's palace, it's supposed to look like a palace. And how do I know that this is one of the 613 mitzvahs? The pasuk in this week's Parshat Maasei, Kilachem nasati es haaretz l'resh loisav es nachaltem es asher shvat l'voseichem. If you skip about 15 lines, in the middle of the line there's like a base in parentheses. In the middle of the line there's a base in parentheses. Right before that base, the Ramban proved a point, and his point was Harei nitztavinu b'kibush b'chol hadoros. And therefore, this is a mitzvah l'doros. It has nothing to do with, maybe when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. And when the Beis Hamikdash is not standing, it's not a mitzvah. Now here, look at the Ramban. The Ramban's a Rishon. Anybody that learns Ramban in Shas, he is one of the most makatzeri, a Rashba you can learn, a Ritva you can learn. They explain. The Ramban, every word costs money. Sometimes you learn a Ramban, you say, couldn't you put a couple of more words? I would understand it more clearly. The Ramban's very picky about his words. The Ramban says, Harei nitzavinu b'kibush b'kol hadoros. Ramban doesn't say that the mitzvah in every generation is to live in Eretz Yisrael. He says there's a mitzvah in every generation to conquer Eretz Yisrael. Now, there are some times that you don't have an army. You can't conquer anything. When you can conquer, you can conquer. But what do you do with the Satma and the Turei Karta Sholei Shavuos in Ksubis? The Ramban doesn't even talk about it. Why? Because as we talk about many times, it's Haggadah. It has nothing to do with halacha. V'omer ani ki ha-mitzvah shechacham mafligim ba'avudiras Eretz Yisrael ad she'omru kol yotzei mena v'dor b'chutz lo te'ibnei kodev avodah zarah ki gershuni ayem mistapeh b'nas Hashem leim lech avoid Elohim acherim. The mitzvah that the Gemara talks about, that if you live in chutz lo, it's as if you avoid avodah zarah. All those Gemaras and Ksubas that talk about Eretz Yisrael come from the pasuk in Parshat Maasei that made it one of the 613 mitzvah in Eretz Yisrael. V'im kain he mitzvah asay l'doros. Living in Eretz Yisrael and conquering Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah for every generation. Has nothing to do with the Beis Hamikdash. Mischayev kol echad mimenu, afilu bizman golus, and even at the time when we're in exile, if you can conquer, conquer. If you can live, live. Tiyadur b'Talmud b'Mekayim Mishak, as we see in the Talmud in many places. Now, there are Rishonim that hold like this, and Rishonim like this, hold Rishonim like this. That's the Ramban. There are a lot of people who are big Ramban fans. They learn every Ramban ala Torah in the Chamish Chumshei Torah when they're learning the Sedra. They learn every Ramban when they're learning Gemara, Baba Kama, every Ramban. What does Ramban mean? Every word. When you come to this Ramban, they say, okay, there are other Rishonim. Don't hold like that. This is what we talk about all the time, that when you come to Eretz Yisrael, the sugi is so difficult that it seems that we can never get past it and get to where we need to be. And that's one of the parshas again in this week's parsha. Suddenly you have Ruvain, Gad, Chatzishev, Menashe. Oh, we have a lot of cattle. Maybe we can stay here. Why do we need to cross the Jordan? And Moshe Ben gives them a big musa shmuz. What are you talking? Everybody should go to war and you're going to live here? The Medrash, which we didn't get a chance to look at, the Medrash Rabbah and the Pasuk says, we all know historically that the northern kingdom was exiled 100+ years almost before the southern kingdom. The Assyrians sent the 10 tribes into Golus, before Yerushalayim and Yehuda and Binyamin went into Golus. Why? The Gemara, the Medrash and the Pasuk says, because these people, when it came time to go into Eretz Yisrael, they valued their money and their cattle so greatly that they didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. They wanted to stay, what we call an Eivra Yad, and eventually gets Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. But they wanted to stay with their money. And because they wanted to stay with their money, they went into Golus before everybody else. Eretz Yisrael has a price. People want to pay the price, that's fine. People that don't want to pay the price, that's also fine. But you got to make a cheshbon hanefesh. The justifications and all the excuses and all the heterim and all the gutamaises where nobody looks for heterim on how early is Shabbos out. And nobody looks for heterim about, can I eat this hashgacha? And nobody looks for heterim on the esrig. But everybody looks for heterim on Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because it's the toughest sugya in Torah. We never seem to be able to get it straight. Should be Zoicha to be Chodesh Av, Menachem Av. Our Nechama comes. It's brought down in Sforim. Menachem Av. Av is Aleph Beis. Our Nechama comes from keeping the Aleph Beis in its order. That's where Nechama comes from, keeping an order to the Aleph Beis. Yirmiyah did something in Kinnis that we spoke about many times, the Gemara in Sanhedrin Kuf Dalet. Every parak in Eicha goes according to the Aleph Beis. Eicha, Bachai Sifke, except in 3 parakim, he put, should be ayin pei, he put the pei before the ayin. Should be samach ayin pei. He put pei before ayin. The Gemara says because the whole Tisha B'Av comes from the Chet HaMeraglim. And the Chet HaMeraglim was a peh, ayin. Peh, the mouth, ayin, the eye. These people talked about something and they didn't see that it was a lie. They said things that they didn't really see. So therefore the peh comes before the ayin because that was the Chet HaMeraglim. Getting the Aleph Beis mixed up and get your priorities mixed up and your justifications mixed up is the Chet HaMeraglim. The Nechama is Menachem Av, to keep the Aleph Beis Pashat straight, the priorities Pashat straight. We have our priorities straight. The Rebbeinu Shalom Meher Yameinu will be Mahapach. This Chodesh Av should be L'Sosna L'Simcha. Everybody have a wonderful Shabbos and a good Chodesh.